We often think of globalization as this really modern thing, right? Something from the last few decades. But the truth is, the connections that tie our planet together are way, way older than that. In this explainer, we're going to dig into the surprisingly ancient story of our global world. So, let's get into it.
Okay, so let me ask you this. When did our global world really begin? 50 years ago? 100? Maybe 500? I mean, that's how most of us would probably guess, right? But the source material we're diving into today, it's going to challenge that whole idea.
Yeah, the answer is thousands of years older than you probably think. Seriously, the story of our global world isn't really about fiber optic cables or jumbo jets. It's a much, much longer human story of travel, trade, and just human connection that goes back for ages.
So, to really get a handle on our world today, we've got to go back, way back. Let's look at how these first threads of connection were woven deep in our past. Here's some of the earliest evidence we have.
From the very dawn of civilization, people have been on the move. We're talking as far back as 3000 BCE, when there was already busy coastal trade between the Indus Valley and West Asia. And for literally thousands of years, you had travelers, traders, and pilgrims carrying everything imaginable across vast distances. It wasn't just goods and money. It was ideas, new inventions, and even germs and diseases. By the time you get to the 13th century, these global links were just unmistakable.
And probably the most famous example of this early interconnectedness is a trade network I bet you've heard of. We're talking about the Silk Routes.
Just look at this 8th century painting. It gives us a little peek into that world. Now, the Silk Routes, it's a bit of a misnomer. It wasn't just one single road. Think of it more like a vibrant, sprawling network of paths, crisscrossing both land and sea. And for centuries, these routes basically stitched together huge regions of Asia, linking them all the way to Europe and North Africa.
And spoiler alert, it was about so much more than just silk. You had Chinese pottery heading west, along with Indian spices and textiles. In the other direction, you had precious metals like gold and silver flowing east from Europe. But here's the really crucial part. Trade and culture always went hand in hand. Ideas and beliefs traveled right alongside the goods. Buddhism spread from India along these very routes, and later on, Christian and Muslim missionaries followed those same paths deep into Asia.
Okay, so then we hit the 16th century, and suddenly the pace of everything just accelerates dramatically. European exploration wasn't just about finding new sea routes. It started to fundamentally reshape the world. You could even say it started to shrink it.
Let's talk about food for a second. Who doesn't love food? Here's a fun one: noodles and spaghetti. Did noodles travel west from China and eventually become spaghetti? Or was it Arab traders who brought pasta to Sicily? Honestly, we're not 100% sure. But what it proves is that even the stuff on our dinner plates is a product of this ancient global exchange. Kinda cool, right? But the biggest food revolution, well, that came after Columbus's voyages. Just think about it. So many of our absolute staple foods today, I'm talking potatoes, tomatoes, corn, chili peppers, were totally unknown in Europe and Asia before then. Can you imagine Italian food without tomatoes? The introduction of these foods from the Americas completely transformed diets and lives everywhere.
But this new global food system, it had a really dark side. Take the humble potato. It became so important to the poor in Europe that it literally meant the difference between life and death. So when a disease completely wiped out Ireland's potato crop in the 1840s, the people who depended on it, they faced a catastrophe. We're talking hundreds of thousands starving to death.
And this new era of global exchange wasn't just about food, it was also about conquest. And I want you to listen to this chilling quote from John Winthrop, an early American colonist. He said, "The natives were near all dead of smallpox, so as the Lord hath cleared our title to what we possess." He saw the death of native people from smallpox as a blessing from God that cleared their title to the land. Just let that sink in.
So you see, the European conquest of the Americas, it wasn't just about superior firepower. Not even close. The most powerful weapon wasn't a gun. It was disease. Because of their long isolation, the original inhabitants of the Americas had absolutely no immunity to European sicknesses. So germs like smallpox just ripped through the continent, wiping out entire communities and, well, paving the way for conquest.
And this shrinking world was built on another brutal foundation. You had these massive plantations popping up in the Americas, growing things like sugar and cotton for markets back in Europe. This created an absolutely insatiable demand for labor. And that demand was met by the forced migration of millions of enslaved people captured in Africa. This horrific trade wasn't a side story. It was a central, driving part of this new global economy. All right, let's fast forward to the 19th century, because this is where everything we've talked about builds into something even more intense. We're talking about a truly interconnected world economy, and it was driven by what economists call the three flows.
So what were these flows that totally transformed the globe? Well, first, you had the flow of trade. This is mainly about goods, like cloth and wheat, moving around the planet. Second, you had the flow of labor. We're talking about millions upon millions of people migrating in search of work. And third, the flow of capital. This is money being invested over huge distances to build things like railways, cities, and massive farms.
And the scale of this movement is just staggering. Get this, all told, it's estimated that about 150 million people left their homes in the 19th century. 150 million. Crossing oceans, crossing continents, all looking for a better future. This was a world on the move like never, ever before.
Okay, so let's pull all these threads together. What does all this history tell us about our world right now?
I think the main takeaway here is pretty clear. Our modern, globalized world, with all of its amazing benefits and all of its deep, complicated problems, it wasn't born 50 years ago. Not at all. It was forged over millennia. It's the result of a long and messy history. A story of silk and spaghetti, of potatoes and plagues, of people migrating and money moving, and it stretches back thousands and thousands of years.
And that really just leaves us with one final thought, doesn't it? Our world was built by all of these connections, this massive, ancient web forged by everyone who came before us. So the real question for us today is, what threads are we weaving right now?